it's a really interesting example of open innovation in real time. And I think the answer, of course, will be yes, but. So we've got lovely examples of good things happening at the moment. A great example would be the way in which companies through the BEIS website, which is very good to see, are being asked if you've got capability to help existing manufacturers of ventilators scale up their activities, let us know. That makes a lot of sense where you say you've got a design already, you've got people already making them, they need a bit more capacity. That makes absolute sense. And the response there, I think, has been very positive. You then have another category, which is, are there different designs of ventilators that could be quickly produced and somehow certified and then made? That's a little more perhaps problematic. And then there's the category of, you are a manufacturing firm doing something else. Here is some technology around a medical device, a ventilator that needs making. How do you connect those? And that's where I think there's a bit of a gap at the moment. It's not obvious how a company that's making a very different product at the moment could switch to making ventilators. I think that sort of perhaps easy narrative of, it's just like in the war, we'll just suddenly start making Spitfires and the like. It's not like that. But there are things that manufacturing firms can do, but it has to be quite tightly specified and quite tightly controlled.
In the war, I think actually there was like a 3-year, 4-year run-up to actually hot war starting in the late 1930s, early 40s. Now we're starting from scratch on day one. So
indeed, and I think there's perhaps a difference between a car or truck manufacturer moving into armored vehicles. You can see a logical progression there, and as you say, even that took a while to get right. To go from producing something that is nothing to do with the world of medical devices into producing a medical device that will be in direct contact with a patient and is mission critical, that's a very, very different situation.
I loved Sir Anthony Bamford's comments because Boris Johnson, who's quite friendly with Lord Bamford, I beg his pardon, at JCB, he rang him up and said, look, what can you do to help? And I think Lord Bamford, who makes exactly what we know what he makes at JCB. I think he said, I think we'll have to see how this works. He was master of understatement, I thought, and he wasn't going to say no to the Prime Minister. But as somebody jocularly said on LinkedIn, I think, said, please God, don't let's have JCB making ventilators.
I'm sure they'd make excellent ventilators.
Well, I'm sure you're right in that, but I think it would take a degree of retooling that would take longer than this crisis is going to last. Let's talk about stuff like IP and design. I mean, there was an unverified story coming out of Italy that a 3D printing firm had made spare parts for some ventilators, and they worked. They weren't necessarily built to spec, they weren't necessarily tested, but it was an emergency and it cost them €1 a time. And now apparently they're being sued by the owner of the IP for breach of copyright because these things under patent law, they can carry on making them for $11,000 a piece. This guy was making them for $1 a piece effectively. This is all very difficult, isn't it? IP designs. Has anybody clarified that? Because I haven't seen anything in the press or on social media about how you actually do this.
So this is slightly above my pay grade, but my personal view on this is there's a bunch of different things here. One is it's fantastic to see people engaging with a problem and saying, there's a shortage there, we need to do something about it, we have the capability to do it. And that's marvelous to see, and we'll see lots more of that. Within that, there's these subtle issues of, hang on, the thing you've just made, you didn't have the right to make. So it's done a good thing, but you have infringed someone's copyright potentially. I don't know about the particular case in detail. I've only seen, as you say, the unverified news story, but you can see how that could happen. But perhaps of more concern, does the product actually work as specified, made with the right materials, on the right machine, sterilized in the right way, delivered, packaged in the right way, so that the medical teams can say, yep, I can pick that up and I can use that and I know where it's come from. So if someone has designed something and said, this device made on machines like this is approved for use in this way, and you just take the basic drawing or the basic CAD file or STL file and just print it on your own machine and then deliver it to a hospital, is that hospital really going to be comfortable taking that device, knowing it's come from effectively an unregulated supply chain? I think that's perhaps more of the issue.
Let's Tim, just sort of wrap with a couple of forward-looking things, if I may. Obviously, the spirit of collaboration out there, we've been astonished at the manufacturer on our community website by the degree of responsiveness we're getting, and as has everybody else, as you mentioned, the BEIS website and so on. Manufacturers really are rallying to the cause, and one hopes that this really advances what we've all been saying, which is that collaboration is the way forward, and you know, red in tooth and claw competition, its days are done. So number one, let's address that. Do you see a brighter future once all this is gone?
Yes, I do. I'm an optimist by nature, but I think that manufacturing is in itself. It's a making, it's a creative, it's an innovative activity in its own right. And I see the way in which the manufacturing community is coming together to overcome these barriers that we're all facing has been absolutely fantastic. Now, if we jumped ahead to the point you were making there about, does this mean that competition red in tooth and claw is over? No, I don't believe that. But I do believe that people realize two things. One is you can achieve amazing things with collaboration. But two, collaboration is also quite difficult. It's very easy to have the idea, very easy to share things you might think about doing together, but to go all the way through to execution, and particularly in an environment as we're facing now, in a healthcare environment where if you get it wrong, people will suffer, that's particularly a challenging area. And I think that's one that needs, we're learning a lot about it at the moment, but I think when all this is done, I know this is pretty brutal times, this will pass. And in the future, we're going to look back and go, what do we do right? What do we do wrong? It's been brilliant the way these collaboration activities have shot forward, but I think there are lots of lessons we could learn about how do you make sure that the right collaborations happen and they fit into the healthcare supply chain as effectively as possible.
And a final thought about supply chains generally. The supply chains coming out of China dried up to a large extent. People are wondering where they're going to get parts. Indeed, that's a factor in this ventilator story because a lot of the PCBs and so on are sourced in China. But do you think that we're going to see a different type of supply chain generally for UK manufacturing? Is it possible to identify what's going to happen in future?
I think this has certainly shown to an extreme level the fragility of many supply chains, and that's something that's been known about for years, but until you face something like this, it's not always obvious what you should do about it. So I think, again, quite a specialist area, but the resilience of supply chains, I think, will become of ever-increasing interest, and an event like this happening, which feels even a few months ago so unlikely, has happened now and happened way more than people anticipated, means that in the future I think we'll pay a lot more attention to understanding supply chains, their resilience, and our ability to produce things closer to home if we assume that borders get closed.